Whoa, it's my face! What's up, Ginger Cornets? So if you somehow haven't heard, the Pokemon anime is getting a time skip. After 27 seasons, 25 of which including Ash Ketchum, we are finally getting 1 year later. So with the release of Pokemon Horizons Mega Voltage, yes, that's the actual title, it sounds freaking awesome, I know. I figured, you know what? Pokemon Horizons is oddly complex for a Pokemon series. Like, the plot isn't by any means like, oh my god, what the hell is happening? But also it kind of is, because I was rewatching it and there were some parts that I just directly did not remember whatsoever. I thought it would be a good idea to go through literally all of Horizons and go over the important events so that way everyone is all caught up. And hey, if you haven't watched Horizons, I would recommend it, but if you do want to just skip right to the new series, this will teach you literally everything you need to know, so strap in, because oh my god, this show has a lot. So here we go, part 1, Liko and Roy's departure. So we're introduced to our main character Liko, who's a pretty shy and introverted girl from the Paldea region, but she's come to Kanto to attend Indigo Academy, which is where her parents met. Now she's given a Sprigatito as her starter Pokemon based on a bunch of interviews she did before going to the school, and she also is really into this streamer named Nidothing. I'm sure that's not going to come back later. Now the most important thing you'll need to know about Liko is that she has a pendant that was given to her by her grandmother, and she keeps it around as like a good luck charm, but honestly, she doesn't actually know the history behind it, it's just kind of there. But unfortunately, some really sus guy comes to the school. Now this is a Methio, and he's here with a message from Liko's grandmother that she needs the pendant back, which, yeah. Very sus. Now Liko is a lot smarter than Ash, and she's immediately like, okay, this dude cannot be trusted, time to make a run for it. And then Amethio and his 2 goons, Zerk and Onya, don't worry, they're like irrelevant to the story, chase her down, and then some guy on a Charizard just flies in and starts battling Amethio and his Ceruledge. And Liko's running on rooftops trying to escape what the hell is happening, but then one of Ceruledge's Psycho Cuts is about to hit her, and the pendant glows, and Terapagos comes out. So just a little background on where we were at when this episode aired. We didn't know what this thing was. Terapagos had been revealed, but they'd only ever showed the Terastal form, so people were suspecting this could be a pre-evolution, but no, it's just Terapagos, it's baby Terapagos. But yeah, turns out the pendant is actually a Pokemon, and it was able to protect Liko from harm. Now the guy on the Charizard takes Liko with him to help her escape from the danger, and this is Freed. He's captain of the Rising Volt Tacklers. So the Rising Volt Tacklers are kind of hard to describe. They're almost like mercenaries, but they're good guys. They kind of just do jobs for money, and they fly around in a giant airship called the Brave Olivine. So aside from Freed, the members consist of Murdoch, who's the chef, Orla, the mechanic, Molly, the nurse, and the actual captain, Captain Pikachu! Oh, and there's also this guy named Ludlow, and he literally just sits around fishing all day. I'm sure he's not going to be important whatsoever. Now, the Rising Volt Tacklers were tasked to protect Liko from Amethio and these people, known as the Explorers. So the Explorers are after the pendant for some reason, and it's up to the Rising Volt Tacklers to save her. And there's this bit where Liko's like, am I the main character? Yes. Now, Amethio and his goons invade the ship, and Captain Pikachu fights off Ceruledge, and Amethio's like, Pikachu, are you toying with me? And it's like, bro, did you not just watch the World Championships? Pikachus are in right now. But after fighting off the Explorers, the Rising Volt Tacklers are off to Paldea to deliver Liko. I shouldn't have worded it like that, it makes her sound like some kind of product. To drop Liko off at home. Now, unfortunately, due to the Explorers' attack, the ship is in pretty rough shape, so they stop at an island off the coast of Kanto. Maybe it's one of the Sevi Islands, who knows? But another aspect of the Rising Volt Tacklers is that on the Brave Olivine, they just have a bunch of wild Pokemon who are just kind of vibing, one of which is a Fuecoco who falls off the ship and meets this boy, Roy. Now, Roy dreams of traveling the world, but he is yet to actually leave the island. And similar to Liko's pendant, Roy has an ancient Pokeball that he treats as his own personal treasure that was gifted to him by his grandfather. Now, after Roy meets the rest of the Rising Volt Tacklers, Amethio, of course, storms in and is ready to try to take the pendant. However, while this battle's taking place, Roy's Pokeball reacts to the energy from Liko's pendant and opens finally, and out comes a shiny Rayquaza. Okay, that happened. And now that there's a Rayquaza out and it's ready to throw hands, Amethio's out of there. Now, the gang, of course, asks Roy's grandfather about the Pokeball, and he reveals he just kind of found it washed up on shore one day and thought it was garbage, but kind of looked cool. But wanting to learn more, Roy catches Fuecoco as his partner Pokemon and joins up with the Rising Voltacklers. Now cut to the Explorers headquarters in some undisclosed location, and Demethio is reporting back to the leader of the group, Gibeon. And while he's doing this and talking about like, yeah, okay, so we kind of failed, but also there was a Rayquaza, so you can't really blame us. This other guy named Spinel is mocking Demethio and calling him incompetent and that, oh my god, I can't believe this guy's the one who was put on the mission. And Gibeon's all like, you know what? Yeah, Spinel, you're on the mission now. Now, one thing I didn't mention when I went over the Rising Voltacklers is there's actually a secret room with another member on the ship. And this is Dot, Murdoch's niece. And she is a shut-in otaku who streams all day and just does tech stuff. She just like me for real. Now, the only one who ever goes in and out of Dot's room is this Quaxley on the ship. And it's kinda interesting that Nidothing's partner is also a Quaxley. Is it a coincidence? Absolutely! Now, Liko tries to befriend Dot, but yeah, she's uninterested because real people. Now, fast forward a bit, the Rising Voltacklers have arrived in Paldea and they're dropping Liko off at her house. And here's something we learn about Liko. Her family is loaded. They have a giant house, her dad is a renowned children's book illustrator, her mom is like a college professor, but then Liko's like, hey, I don't want to just live here, I want to travel more. And then her dad's like, I don't know about that one, Chief. But then she's like, Dad, I'm growing up, I need to experience new things. And then he's like, all right, I know about that one, Chief, you're off. And then Liko is now officially a member of the Rising Voltacklers. So while they're in Paldea, might as well sightsee a bit. So they go to Artisan, where they finally meet Nemona and Brassius, the first characters from the Scarlet and Violet games who actually make an appearance in the anime. Now, Roy loses a battle to Brassius because he's got this brand new hip thing called Terastalization, but then Brassius shows a sculpture he made of a giant Arboliva. So turns out there had been sightings in a nearby forest that had burned down, so Nemona leads Liko, Roy, and also Molly tags along to the spot, and they find a Wooper, or a Paldean Wooper. A pooper, who is in pretty bad condition, and Molly decides to heal it up because, you know, Molly's doing that doctoring thing. And this is when we learn a little more about Molly and her past, and it's kind of bleak. So Molly was in training to be an actual Pokemon Center doctor, but decided not to because Pokemon Centers, for as well funded as they clearly are really only healing the Pokemon trainers bring in. And there's plenty of Pokemon out in the wild who aren't ever brought to Pokemon Centers and end up just dying from their injuries. Yikes. So the reason Molly is traveling with the Rising Voltacklers is because she wants to meet a lot of wild Pokemon who need her help and then heal them before it's too late. But uh-oh, it's that giant Arboliva. But also look, it has one of the ancient Pokeballs that Roy had. Wait, could this mean that Rayquaza and Arboliva are connected somehow? Yes. Now Arboliva's all like, get out of my forest, losers, but then realizes they just healed the pooper. So it's like, alright, we chill. But then Terapagos comes out of the pendant and kind of just talks to Arboliva like, hey bro, what's up? And then all of a sudden there's this thick mist and everyone sees a vision of this man, but they can't really make out who it is or why they're seeing it. Now Arboliva enters its Pokeball and joins the gang on their adventure. Meanwhile, Spinel is kind of just watching from the distance. So Liko's mom is a woman named Luca, and she actually used to be Fried's teacher. Now Luca knows about this guy named Lucius who lived 100 years ago, and there's all these legends about him and how he had the 6 hero Pokemon. And Fried asks, oh, is that connected to the pendant somehow? And she has no idea. So even though her mother, aka Liko's grandmother, is the one who gave Liko the pendant, Luca really doesn't know much about it. And so she's like, hey, you should ask Liko's grandmother. She's the one who will have all the answers. Now Liko's grandmother is actually an adventurer who's going all over the world to do all sorts of adventure-y things, and she's currently at the ancient castle in the Galar region, so that's where the gang decides to head next. However, their trip to Galar is cut short when the Brave Olivine's computer system completely goes down due to a storm of magneton. And while Dot is busy trying to fix everything, Roy's out and he's catching a watch roll. Epic. Now Fried notices a magneton who seems to be behind all of it and chases it down into Lavencia, and turns out this is actually Spinel's magneton, and it was all a trap so Spinel could trap Fried in this dark alleyway. But it turns out Brassius isn't the only one who can use Terastalization, as Fried terastalizes Charizard into a dark type to easily take down Spinel's magneton and Behem. Now while this is all going down and Fried's like, cool, finally took care of this loser, Murdoch is doing something really important. So he really wants to cook this dish, but doesn't have the spicy herba mystica. But luckily a shop in Lavencia does. So he's like, hey, Liko, you busy? No, cool. Hey, could you go get this for me? And she's like, aight, king. Unfortunately, Spinel spots her and has Behem hypnotize her, and now she's forgotten all of her memories of meeting the Rising Voltacklers and pretty much anything that happened after she got to Indigo Academy. Oh, and also Spinel stole the pendant. Now at this point, the Rising Voltacklers haven't heard from Liko in a few hours, and they're getting pretty worried. Luckily, Dot knows someone who could help. So okay, if there's still any doubt, Dot is Nidothing, and luckily, Lavencia is home to a really popular streamer, the one and only Iono, who Nidothing is apparently really good friends with. So Dot hits up Iono and is like, hey, our friend's missing, can you do a stream with me, like a big collab, and we can get everyone in Lavencia to try to find her. And Iono's like, aight, bet. So the whole city is now chasing after Liko, and she thinks it's some kind of weird game and she has to escape everyone, which honestly fair because that sounds terrifying. But eventually Liko's able to regain her memories, and then Roy's like, hey, this is Iono, and this is Dot, and Liko's like, oh my god, Dot, we haven't actually met. But uh-oh, the pendant is still missing. We have to go track down Spinel and get it back. Also, Dot had never actually officially caught Quaxley, so she finally does that. And now we've got a trio with all 3 starter Pokemon. Funny how that works. So after some searching, they track down Spinel on a nearby cargo ship and are able to get the pendant back. But remember how Liko is a massive Nidothing fan? Yeah, so she's actually not really piecing together that Dot is Nidothing, and then Dot's like, hey Liko, I'm Nidothing, and Liko's like, so let's cut to the Explorers HQ, and Spinel's like, hey Gibeon, you know how we made fun of Amethio for failing? Guess what? But then we also meet the other admins of the Explorers, Chalice, Sidian, and Coral. Also, the internet seems to really like Coral for really wholesome reasons, I'm sure. Now the gang's back on their normally scheduled trip to Galar, and meanwhile, Liko is feeling very flustered and nervous around Dot, and especially when she goes into Dot's room, she's like, oh my god, I'm where Nidothing is filmed and can't really sit still. I swear the show tries to ship these two in like the weirdest way possible. Anyway, it's about time we get a little more background info on Freed, specifically how he met Captain Pikachu. So back in the day, Freed was working a boring 9-to-5 at a company called Exceed, but after quitting this job, he didn't really feel he had much of a purpose, so he kind of just spent all day fishing with Ludlow at Porto Marianda. Now one day, Luca, Liko's mom, hit up Freed and was like, yo Freed, there's this Pikachu, right? And it can fly. And Freed's like, I don't think that's possible. What, are you gonna like strap balloons to it? So this Pikachu is able to vortex itself using Volt Tackle and then just go whoop. And Freed's like, oh my god, Pikachu, you want to see the world and you're trying to get up as high as you can to see a new horizon, you know, like the show is called. So after Pikachu agrees to be Freed's partner, he and Ludlow sail to Slateport City in the Hoenn region to meet up with Orla. And Freed's all like, hey Orla, could you take this old dinky ship and turn it into this super high-tech airship? And then she's like, are you insane? And so she somehow builds this giant airship and the Rising Voltacklers officially begin. Now back to the present, the gang arrives in Galar and is looking for Kabu because as they suspect, hey, Kabu's from Hoenn, Rayquaza's from Hoenn, he might know something. Flawless logic. And after Liko and Roy train at Kabu's gym, he mentions that he saw the Rayquaza flying over Galar Mine. And hey, that's pretty close by to Motostoke, so might as well put off finding Diana, aka Liko's grandmother, for a bit, and go check out these mines. Oh, and on the way to Galar Mine, Liko catches a Hatena. Now when they get to the mines, Liko, Roy, and Freed are immediately ambushed by guess who? Amethio. But that doesn't last long because, oh my god, it's a Galarian Moltres. And just like Arboliva, this thing is massive! And yeah, it seems Arboliva and Moltres know each other, and also Moltres has one of these Pokeballs as well. So Arboliva and Moltres are catching up for a bit, and then Terapagos comes out of the pendant and is like, yo, remember me? It's Terapagos! And they get another vision of that same man, who's actually Lucius, the one Liko's mom mentioned, and he's looking for some place called Lakua. No one really knows what it is, and then the vision ends. So Moltres also joins the group, of course, but what's interesting is Terapagos doesn't go back into the pendant form, it just kinda stays out now. And then Amethio's talking to his 2 goons and is like, cool, we're gonna make our way to the ancient castle, ambush them, and steal Terapagos. Great plan. That being said, even though there were sightings, it seems Rayquaza was no longer at Galar Mine. So after this little excursion, the gang meets up with Diana at the ancient castle, and of course everyone just has a ton of questions, like, where did you get the pendant? Who exactly is this Lucius guy? What the hell is Lakua? So Diana reveals that one day when she was a kid, kid, she found the pendant as well as a book of Lucius's memoirs in her attic, and it inspired her to become an adventurer. However, after years of searching for this Lakua place, she kind of just gave up and decided to focus on other, more realistic adventures. Now, a few months back, this old friend of Diana approached her and offered to help her find Lucius, as long as, well, you know, she gave the pendant to the explorers. And she was like, hey, that's pretty sus. Rising Voltaclers, I think you might need to protect my granddaughter. And she also reveals that this legendary Pokemon, who I've just called Terapagos this whole time, is called Terapagos. And also Lakua is this legendary place that Lucius was after. Now, Lucius's team was known as the Six Heroes, and it consisted of Arboliva, Galarian Moltres, Lapras, Kleavor, Entei, and of course the shiny Rayquaza. And maybe if the gang were to find all 6 of these heroes, they could actually get to this Lakua place and figure out what the heck it is. Now, of course, Amethio and his goons ambush the ancient castle, but meanwhile, the other explorer admins also join the fight, and this includes their butler Hamber. So you know how I mentioned there was this old friend Diana knew? Yeah, that was Hamber, and she's like, hey, what the heck are you doing? What's going on? And he's not really given any answers. Now, there's just an all-out brawl at this point, and Coral is having none of it, because it's taken way too long. So she's like, Glalie, self-destruct, just freaking end this. And obviously, that's a big mistake, because while she does that, the Rising Voltaclers are able to escape through the debris, and then everyone's like, hey, we're supposed to work together to steal this Terapagos guy. Don't have your Pokemon just kind of explode. And after escaping, Diana gives Liko Lucius's book and belt, telling her to seek out the remaining 4 heroes. And just like, check out this absolute drip of a belt. And you know what? That's how we end part 1. Okay, I know part 1 took a while to go over. Trust me, none of the other parts will take this long. It's just that there's obviously a lot of exposition early on. And also part 2's kind of a filler arc in many ways. You'll see what I mean. Part 2 time, the Sparkling of Terapagos. So the explorers are having a meeting about what just went on at the ancient castle, and everyone's kind of upset at Amethio because he acted on his own even though he was removed from the mission. But then he has a very interesting point, and that's that Arboliva and Moltres only seem to have reawakened after Rayquaza flew over those spots. And then Gibeon's like, good observation, my boy, you're back on the team. So back to the Rising Voltaclers, there had been a lot of rumors of a singing Pokemon who would guide sailors who were stuck at sea and in danger. And of course, the gang immediately suspects this could be Lucius's Lapras. They then meet the captain of a cargo ship who was transporting berries, who confirms that, yeah, there was this strong mist, but then a Pokemon seemed to save the ship. However, they did end up losing all of their cargo. Now, the Rising Voltaclers for now are actually at sea trying to find Lapras, which is interesting because this whole time they've kind of just been flying through the air. And of course, they end up experiencing the strong mist the other ship captain told them about. But while all this is happening, an Ambipom and a Toedscruel board the brave Olivine and try to steal a bunch of food. They're able to fight them off, but kind of interesting considering Ambipom and Toedscruel both don't live in Galar, and also, what the heck would they even be doing in the middle of the sea? So the next time they see this mist, guess who's ready? And all of a sudden the mist is gone and they see the giant Lapras as well as a giant group of Pokemon pirates. So basically what had been happening is Lapras was using the move Mist to basically trick all these sailors and ship captains, be like, oh no, we don't know where we are. And then Lapras would be like, hey, let me save you. And they'd be like, wow, thanks Lapras, you're such a G. Meanwhile, all these pirate Pokemon were stealing all the food and other cargo from these ships. The whole thing was just a big scam. Also, Lapras has clearly taken some serious damage, having multiple scars as well as a cracked shell. Now, after Lapras leaves a second time, Liko has the idea of, well, why don't we just lure it to us? And they find these sea caves and basically just put a bunch of berries all over the place, and sure enough, Lapras and its Pokemon pirates come right there. Well, that was easier than expected. And of course, Moltres and Arboliva come out to be like, hey Lapras, long time no see, you should join up with us. And it's like, yeah, alright. And then they get another vision of Lucius, and this time he's saying that he needs to stay in Lakua to stay alive. So could it be that Lucius is still alive 100 years later? Surely not. I mean, that would be ridiculous. But you know what else is ridiculous? That evening, guess who appears overhead? It's the Black Rayquaza. And then guess who else is there? It's Amethio. And he's like, alright, Cerulege, we're gonna actually take down this Rayquaza. And he gets absolutely bodied. And then Terapagos is like, hey Rayquaza, let's fight. And then powers up for the first time into its Terastal form, and then quickly loses all of its power because it clearly doesn't have the strength to fight. And then Rayquaza just dips again. It's like, alright, bye. And at this point, Diana's like, alright, I think you guys have this all under control. I'm gonna leave as well, and I'm gonna go focus on my own adventures, because, you know, you kind of interrupted me. I was in the middle of something. But before she goes, she's like, hey, you guys should go back to Paldea, because Terapagos clearly has some relationship with terastalization. And, you know, that's the Paldea thing. And it's like, bro, we were just in Paldea. Now back at the Explorer's base, Amethio's talking to Hamber, and he's like, hey, I'm clearly not strong enough to beat Rayquaza. And Hamber's like, bro, I know. And then he's like, will you train me? And Hamber's like, sure. So Amethio's Ceruledge battles Hamber's Dusknoir, and after Hamber terastalizes it, it's a pretty easy win. But Hamber's like, you know what? You've shown me you're strong. Here, have my Terra Orb. Ceruledge can use it, probably get a lot stronger. Maybe you'll have some kind of shot against Rayquaza. But yeah, the gang is on their way back to Paldea, and here we go. Filler episode lightning round. So Dot stops in the city to get a new microphone, but then there's a Tinkatink who steals it and uses it to build a hammer. And Dot's like, wow, stealing is so cool, and catches Tinkatink. Then Liko meets the breeder that raised Sprigatito before it was given to her, and Sprigatito learns Magical Leaf. Then all of a sudden, Murdoch's sister is there, aka Dot's mom, and is like, hey Dot, I'm gonna pick you up now and like bring you back home. And similar to like Liko was, Dot's like, you know what, no, I want to stay, and then beats her mom in a battle to show that she's worthy of staying with the Rising Volt Tacklers. Which, like, why is everything in the Pokemon world determined via a battle? Like, I'm not complaining, I think it's awesome. And then there's a random beach episode, and okay, this one I will actually talk about. So remember Ludlow, old man, fishes all day? So it turns out he actually is a retired superhero who has an All Might style muscle form, and he's named Mighty G. So with that out of the way, there's this limited edition Wiglet snack that everyone wants to get, and then Liko buys one, but then Coral's like, hey, I wanted the last one, and she's in a disguise so Liko doesn't know it's her. And then Liko's like, cool, we can share, and opens it, and Coral's like, no, I was gonna keep it mint and sealed in box. Like, look, I get the collector mindset of wanting something and wanting to keep it in box, but like, girl, that is food. It's gonna go bad. That is disgusting. Oh yeah, also the Explorers can kind of just create these like automatic disguises whenever they want because, you know, science. So the gang arrives in Paldea, and Freed realizes there's this mysterious tower on an island off the coast of Paldea and is like, hey, that's kinda weird. This wasn't there before. I'm gonna go check it out, which is a bad idea because of course it's a trap that Spinel set up. So Spinel's plan was basically to get Freed away from the rest of the Rising Volt Tacklers, knowing he's the biggest threat. Meanwhile, the rest of the Explorers are over at a lighthouse by Lavencia, and they're setting up these sound waves with these speakers that are able to basically mimic the ones Terapagos creates, hoping it'll help summon Rayquaza. And you know what? It works! So they're ambushing Rayquaza, and they're actually getting a few good surprise hits on it, but then the Rising Volt Tacklers are like, hey, we need to like stop the Explorers, because they're probably up to no good, of course. So Dot's able to hack into the speakers and dismantle them. Meanwhile, Freed's battling Spinel and his Umbreon with Captain Pikachu, and is able to use the battle to help escape using Pikachu's Volt Tackle to break down the door. Meanwhile, Rayquaza's got its groove and is really overpowering the Explorers. And you know who doesn't like that very much? It's Coral, who has Glalie, you guessed it, self-destruct. And Rayquaza is knocked into the Brave Olivine, basically destroying it. Now, luckily everyone's okay, but the ship is no longer functional. So anyway, with the Explorers defeated, it's up to the Rising Volt Tacklers to beat Rayquaza, and of course, they're not doing a great job, even after Freed manages to return. So Rayquaza launches a Draco Meteor, and one of them is about to hit Liko, and you know what? That's probably gonna hurt. But luckily, guess who jumps in right in time? It's Amethio's Ceruledge. So Amethio's kind of part of the Explorers still, kind of doing his own thing, kind of doesn't really agree with them, definitely doesn't like Spinel, and then him and Freed are like, hey, we're kind of after the same thing. What if we teamed up, take down Rayquaza? So Charizard flies Ceruledge up, and they help battle Rayquaza together. And then Sprigatito ends up evolving into Floragato, joins the fight, and then Rayquaza ends up fleeing again. So we're kind of in an awkward position, because the Brave Olivine is no longer functional, so how are we actually gonna find the remaining heroes? Well, Liko, Roy, and Dot realize, hey, terastalization seems to be pretty pretty important to becoming stronger. And then Freed's like, here's what you're gonna want to do. We're already in Paldea. You need to attend Naranja Academy because they have a Terastal course. Also, yeah, it's only Naranja Academy, no Uva. I guess Violet is just non-canon. Anyway, back at the Explorer's base, Gibeon's like, you know what? We're done trying to catch Rayquaza and failing every time. What if we just let the Rising Voltaclers catch the remaining of the 6 heroes, bringing Terapagos back to its full strength, so then we can use its energy. Though he does instruct the admins to keep an eye on the Rising Voltaclers just to be safe. Gibeon also mentions something called Laquium, which is apparently in Laqua and important for some reason. Also, he just casually has a shiny Zygarde. Okay. And that's the end of part 2. That was pretty quick, honestly. We're now officially halfway through, with part 3 being the Terastal Debut. And hey, if you're a dub watcher, this would now be the start of season 2, The Search for Laqua. So this part kind of takes a backseat on the Rising Voltaclers and focuses more on Liko, Roy, and Dot completing their Terastal course. So it starts with the 3 of them arriving in Mesagoza to attend Naranja Academy. And of course, we see a bunch of characters from the Scarlet and Violet games who had yet to actually appear in the anime so far. So the first part of their Terastal course will be to travel to different cities so they can each battle an assigned gym leader, and the gym leader will assess how well they're able to use terastallization. Now, even though they all get Terra Orbs, they're not really allowed to legally use them in the field until they pass this course. Also, Chalice disguises herself as a teacher and apparently just gets away with that and no one questions it, and by doing so, she helps Sidian and Coral get into the school under the amazing aliases of Seasoning and Cornbread. I'm telling you, like the Naranja Academy security is terrible. Now, the first gym trial battle is Liko's against the gym leader Katie, and even though Liko's doing pretty well at first, once Katie terastallizes her Teddiursa into a bug type, it's pretty much all over, though Liko demonstrated that, hey, she can at least use terastallization decently well, so she passes. Next is Roy's rematch with Brassius, which he's actually able to win. You see, Sudowoodo was using Substitute to kind of throw Roy off his rhythm, but Roy determined, hey, if I just make the battlefield really hot with Flamethrower, only the real Sudowoodo will sweat. I don't know why a rock who pretends to be a tree can sweat, but you know what? It was a pretty good strategy. And finally, Dot has her battle with, guess who? Iono. And of course this battle's gonna be streamed, why wouldn't it be? So at first Dot was gonna do the battle as Nidothing, but then pulls a me like 3 years ago and was like, you know what, being anonymous on the internet is cringe, and battles as herself, and even though she loses, this was an amazing battle. So the gang has now all completed their first trial missions and are heading back to Mesagoza. On the way, Roy's Wattrel evolves into Kilowattrel. I haven't mentioned Wattrel at all up until now, it's not really important, I'm sorry. And then Liko's Hatena, who I don't think I've really mentioned either, evolves into Hatchram. And the reason it does this is there's a bunch of Annihilate who are fighting, and they're like, we have to calm them down somehow. And Hatena's like, wait, I got this, evolves into Hatchram, beats them up, and then that works. The answer was violence. Anyway, it's been a while. Let's catch back up with Freed and ya boy, oh, Captain, my captain. So Freed used to work in this company called Exceed, and he goes back there to visit, and he's just kind of sneaking around in places he shouldn't be. And that's because he overheard someone mention something called the Treasure of Eternity, and that sounds pretty epic. And after some snooping, he realizes that this actually is Laquium. And then there's security guards who are like, hey, you can't be here, and the captain's just like, kaboom! And it's really based. Also, this whole time Spinel was spying on him, and I think going forward, we can just assume that when anyone's doing anything, Spinel is spying on them, because oh my god, this guy just like does not leave you alone. Anyway, back to the Explorer's base, Gibeon's like, we need more Laquium, I need it, I need it, there's some reason that I need this stone, like oh my god, it's almost like it's keeping me alive or something. Oh, and also turns out Amethio is Gibeon's grandson. So the trio arrives back to Naranja Academy, where their next task is battling members of the Elite Four. So Coral, or Cornbread, is battling, and is like, you know what? Taking too long! Glalie, kill them. Kill you too. Just kill everyone. And then Glalie explodes, and she's like, cool, everyone's dead, I win. But then she has to be told that if a Pokemon uses self-destruct and knocks out all Pokemon, the user of the move loses. And it's funny, because that's an actual VGC rule that they just incorporated into the show. And then Coral's like, that's stupid, I'm not playing by that. And then Larry says this.
Here in the real world, your headcanon rules won't be accepted.
Anyway, while this is happening, Dot meets Penny, and the two bond over being nerds. And also Penny's like, yeah, kind of sus that they just had a new teacher start and no one questioned it. Like seriously, why is this just like okay? But the two see Chalice reading the Scarlet Book, and after she leaves, they're like, wait, actually, I should get a book for this. So yeah, Chalice is reading the Scarlet Book, which is represented here by Volume 2 of the Miraculous Ladybug manga. And then she puts it down, and then they're like, oh my god, look at this frame. Now, Liko has to battle Rika in her battle, and she does lose, but also starts to cry, which is actually shown to be a good thing, because it shows that Liko is actually serious about getting better now. Before, she was kind of like, yeah, I'll just kind of go with the flow, I'm not really that focused on being stronger, but she actually takes this loss and decides she wants to learn more from it. And the trio is then given their final assignments, where they're going to have to once again battle gym leaders, but this time it'll actually be taken really seriously. So Liko will have to battle Grusha, Roy's going to battle Rhyme, and then Dot's gonna battle the GOAT, Larry. So Dot has her final Terastal assignment against Larry, and she does lose, but also Quaxley evolves into Quaxwell, and she does use Terastalization well. So Larry's like, hey, I'm a chill guy, I'm gonna pass you anyway. Next is Roy's battle against Rhyme, and to even have a Pokemon battle with her, first he has to beat her in a rap battle, and it's exactly as cringy as you'd expect.
Terra training hard with all that I've got, and it's not impossible to try to take my shot. This Pokemon training is focused, and know this. My passing grade is not close, it's the closest.
Unfortunately, Roy ends up actually losing his match, but then Rhyme's like, you know what, I'll give you one more shot before I fail you. So Roy then trains with Nemona for his rematch and is able to take the win, also passing his Terastal course. And finally is Liko's battle against Grusha, and after a close match, Liko loses and fails the Terastal course. But she gets a rematch, right? No, actually she doesn't, because Grusha's just kind of an asshole. So this means Liko has not only failed the course, but unlike Roy and Dot, she will no longer be able to use Terastalization. As you could imagine, Liko is really upset about this, but as you can also imagine, Amethio shows back up. The two start battling, but then Spinel interrupts them. So Spinel exposes his Umbreon to mist that was harvested using Laqueum, and this thing just goes like completely feral, which, come to think of it, the Laqueum mist is pretty much exactly the same as the R serum in Detective Pikachu. The Japanese name of Laqueum is also Ricurium, so maybe they're connected, probably not, but interesting theory. But yeah, realizing they have basically no shot at winning this, Terapagos turns into its Terastal form and destroys the Laqueum Spinel was using. And Spinel, of course, is kinda pissed about this, and he traps Amethio and Liko in this underground cavern. So the two of them are trapped there, and of course Amethio feels super betrayed. I mean, he already didn't like Spinel, but now he's just like, you know what, screw the explorers. I'm gonna trauma dump to this 12-year-old girl. So he tells Liko about how Gibeon is his grandfather, and how he believes that Terapagos and Rayquaza can help them find Laqua. And in turn, Liko explains to Amethio how she and Terapagos are also after Laqua. And then the two team up to escape the cavern, and are kind of friends, I guess? It's complicated. But yeah, long day, Amethio just kind of lets Liko and Terapagos go. He's not going to try to steal the thing, but you know who's watching? It's good old Spinel, and he's reporting this straight back to headquarters, that little snitch. So Amethio's called to the explorer's base, where Gibeon's like, hey, so you're fired for betraying us, and like, you helped the enemy, so you know what, I'm disowning you as my grandson. Yikes. And speaking of the explorers, guess who's hacked into Naranja Academy's network to steal sensitive information? Yeah, turns out for some reason Naranja Academy has super secret data about Terapagos that the explorers obviously want. Chalcidian and Coral are like, these disguises worked for some reason, time to just ambush everyone. So Liko's battling Sidian, and she's very clearly losing, but then is like, wait, I can still Terastalize. Oh, but it's illegal. So she Terastalizes Florigado and is able to take the win. But guess who's watching? It's not Spinel this time, it's Grusha. So Grusha was back, and he was like, Liko, you're not allowed to do this. Come with me to the principal's office. So in Director Clavel's office, he's like, you know what, you weren't supposed to do that, but thanks for saving the school, it was the right thing to do. And Grusha's like, I shouldn't have failed you. Here's a passing grade, you get to Terastalize now. Yippee! Anyway, the explorers are defeated, but Chalice was able to escape with that sensitive data on Terapagos. And as fate would have it, Liko is paired up against Roy. It is a close battle, but Roy's able to barely make it through in the end after Fuecoco finally evolves into Crocolore. And that, my friends, brings us to an end of Pokemon Horizons Part 3. I have been talking for so long. Oh my god. Okay. Almost done. So finally, let's get into Pokemon Horizons Part 4, Rayquaza Rising. So Ryfort, this guy, is like, hey, you guys should go check out Kitakami. Briar's there, and she'll probably know a lot more about Terapagos. And hey, the Brave Olivine has finally finished its repairs. I guess it's time to go to Kitakami next. Also, there's a big red button on it now.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Now, after they arrive in Kitakami, a device makes Roy and Crocolore swap bodies, and it's pointless, and the filler episode, so I don't know why I'm mentioning it. The gang heads to the Crystal Pool to meet up with Briar. They're like, do you know a lot about Terapagos? And she's like, I have seen one once before, in the Scarlet and Violet Indigo Disc DLC. So one thing that is kind of cool about Pokemon Horizons is it doesn't adapt Scarlet and Violet, and by that I mean with other series it would be like, oh, we're doing Team Galactic now, we're doing this thing from the games. But with Pokemon Horizons, even though it clearly is in the anime's canon, nothing about it contradicts the games, so theoretically all of this could still happen in the game timeline as well, which I think is really cool. Oh, and also Dot's Tinkatink evolved into Tinkatuff, forgot to mention it, not really important. But yeah, unfortunately, even though Briar had seen a Terapagos once before, it doesn't seem like she would be much help. But you know who would be helpful right about now? Perrin. So Dot randomly meets up with Perrin, and she's like, hey, I saw this Kleavor recently, and Dot's like, oh my god, we're looking for a Kleavor. Funny how this extinct Hisuian Pokemon is just here in Kitakami. And Perrin's like, also I have a Hisuian Growlithe. Okay, I know like in the games, Perrin also has a Hisuian Growlithe. Do they ever like explain that? But yeah, Perrin saw Kleavor over on Tengu Mountain and leads the group there, and they follow a bunch of slash marks to find it. But then Lapras comes out of its Pokeball, and then they're like, oh no, those slash marks, the scars on Lapras, these two clearly have beef. Just kidding, they're actually friends. And of course, Kleavor joins the group after a battle once again, and they get another flashback of Lucius. This time though, it's from the perspective of someone he calls Ristal, and it's specifically of Lucius catching Kleavor. So who is this Ristal person? I guess we're gonna have to find out. Luckily, Diana returns, and she has some spicy new info that could come in handy. So it turns out that 100 years ago, Lucius was actually the founder of the Explorers, alongside this Ristal person and, you guessed it, Gibeon. Also, that Exceed company is being secretly run by Gibeon to extract the power from Lockweum. Anyway, there's this rumor that the Crystal Pool can allow you to communicate with people who are dead that were close to you, and they're like, hey, Terapagos seem to be pretty close to this Ristal, why don't we see if we can communicate with her? Yeah, it's basically the same thing Tapu Fini does in Sun and Moon in that one episode where Mallow gets to meet her dead mom. Hey guys, future me here. So I didn't realize that this is actually something you can do with Terapagos in the games. Like if you bring it to the Crystal Pool, the professor, depending on your version, will appear from the dead. I didn't know this when I recorded this video, and I just learned this last night when I was playing Pokemon Violet on my Switch 2 to test out the whole 60 FPS thing, and I just so happened to go to the Crystal Pool and triggered this event. So yeah, learned this completely on accident, but it does make the scene in the anime make a bit more sense now, because I was just like, what is this lore they're just pulling out of nowhere? But yeah, with that out of the way, let's get back to Pokemon Horizons. But yeah, they finally meet Ristal back from the dead, and she's holding a baby whose name is Layla. And also, the baby isn't dead also, she just has it. Like, the baby grew up and lived a full life, presumably. And actually, we do know that it did, because Layla was the name of Diana's mother. And then they pieced together, wait, this means that Ristal's related to Diana. And then Ristal's like, oh yeah, also Lucius is the father. So Lucius is Liko's great-great-grandfather. I mean, I think like most of us kind of pieced together that like Lucius and Liko are probably related, but it is nice to have the confirmation. Also, turns out Terapagos was her Pokemon, not Lucius's, and it was nicknamed Pagogo, which they decided to just start using. And it's at this point that Ristal then takes the time to basically tell the whole story about her, Lucius, and Gibeon. So after the three of them had arrived in Lockwood 100 years ago, Gibeon wanted to harness the power of Lockweum, which seemed to have really extraordinary powers, but could also cause mass destruction. And when Gibeon tried to take the Lockweum for himself, it started to spread exponentially, causing a potential threat to all the Pokemon in Lockua. To save everyone, Pagogo used up all of its strength to seal the Lockweum in a barrier, with Lucius stuck inside, and then splits its power between Lucius's 6 Pokemon, reverting back into its pendant form. Okay, lore drop officially over. Ristal's about to disappear, but before she does, she entrusts Liko with Pagogo, and Liko actually officially catches Terapagos after all this time, bringing her grand total of Pokemon pot up to 3. After all this goes down, the Rising Voltaclers learn that there have been a bunch of Entei sightings in Olivine City in the Johto region. And hey, Olivine City, Brave Olivine, turns out it's called this because it's where Ludlow grew up. And also Mighty G used to be a movie star.
The Versus Sharpedo cinematic universe produced so many amazing movies, you have no idea!
It's giving strong B-movie vibes.
They get there and battle an Entei, but it doesn't end up responding to Pagogo, so they kind of come to the conclusion that this couldn't have been Lucius's Entei, it was just some random wild Entei that apparently exist. Also, it's revealed around this point that Cerventus, aka Freed's old boss at Exceed, is actually Amethio's father. He's not really that important though, hence why I didn't even bring him up until now. But then Briar hits up the Rising Voltaclers and is like, hey, are you guys still looking for Entei? Because there was an Entei sighting in Area 0 down in the Great Crater of Paldea. So the gang heads back to Paldea for like the 5th time? I don't know, I've lost track. Now, to get permission to enter Area 0, Liko, Roy, and Dot have to take down Gita, Paldea's champion, and they manage to do it, because even in the anime, Gita is probably the worst Pokemon champion. And of course, Coral and Sidian are there. Been a while since we've seen them, and they're just kind of keeping tabs on everything. Also, Coral catches a Screamtail, so get used to a lot of this going forward. Now, it turns out Entei is actually, get this, gouging fire. Did not see that one coming. But yeah, after a battle, the Rising Voltaclers get its approval, and all of a sudden, they have 5 of the 6 heroes. If only Rayquaza would just kind of show up and be ready to join them. Well, Rayquaza showed up and seems to be ready to join them. After a battle, of course. It's a really intense fight in Area 0 against Rayquaza, but in the end, only Crocolore is left standing. But Pagogo decides, hey, I want to fight too, and with 5 of the 6 hero Pokemon on its side, it's able to actually stay in its Terastal form for a decent chunk of time. And man, it is just so cool to see Liko commanding Terapagos. Now, unfortunately, Pagogo is close to being defeated, but before it is, it transfers its Terastal to Crocolore. Now, because Crocolore had already Terastalized against Entei, it couldn't do it again, but you know what? Second chances do exist. And with one final Terastalized Flame Charge, Roy was able to get Rayquaza weak enough where he could catch it. And just like that, the Rising Voltaclers officially have all 6 of Lucius's hero Pokemon. And as expected, Rayquaza knows exactly where Lakua is and begins to guide the Rising Voltaclers. The final chapter of their journey is about to commence. Now, going back to the explorers for a second, Amethio, of course, is super sus of Spinel, but not only just because he's, you know, the worst, but he also suspects Spinel might be planning to betray Gibeon. He explains this to Hamber, who backs him up, and we learn that Hamber was basically a father figure to Amethio. His dad was always busy at Exceed, and his mom died in a car crash when he was young, so really Hamber was the one who raised him. And interestingly, Hamber actually trained all of the Explorers admins except Spinel. Anyway, the Brave Olivine gets to a place called Karumi Town, which is basically right at the foot of Lakua. But because Lakua's at the very peak of Karumi Mountain, the Brave Olivine won't be able to make it since the altitude is way too high. So Liko, Roy, Dot, and Freed continue the journey on foot, while the rest of the Rising Voltaclers stay back just in case. Also at the base of Lakua, there's this really suspicious looking building. Wonder what that's all about. After a treacherous climb, the Rising Voltaclers have reached Lakua, and Terapagos destroys the barrier it created 100 years ago, allowing them full permission. Unfortunately, of course, the explorers were right behind, as Gibeon sneaks by to try to harvest more Laquium, like he did 100 years ago. Meanwhile, the other admins are there to stop the Rising Voltaclers. So it turns out that the explorers knew where Lakua was this whole time, and that mysterious building, yeah, that was their base, and they had basically been waiting for the Rising Voltaclers to just get in there so Terapagos could break the barrier. And yeah, Gibeon's been using Lakua's power to basically stay young and live for over 100 years, but since he only has a very small sample of it, he wanted the barrier to be broken so he could essentially have an unlimited supply. And while Gibeon and his Zygarde are harvesting the Lakua, Liko, Roy, and Dot have a triple battle against Sidian, Coral, and Chalice, and they manage to win without needing to Terastalize. And meanwhile, Freed's having a battle with Spinel, and okay, I'm just gonna yap for a bit here because oh my god, this battle was insane. Okay, so basically we have the captain here as well as Charizard. I don't have a Charizard plush on me. So Spinel sends out Umbreon and Behem. It's a double battle, and Behem uses Thunderbolt, but hey, Cop's got Lightning Rod, so it doesn't work. But then Behem uses Skill Swap to swap its telepathy with Lightning Rod, so all of a sudden Pikachu's electric type moves won't work anymore because Behem can just get in the way and absorb it all. But do you know what Free does? Okay, so first he terastallizes Charizard into a dark type, but then has Cap hold Umbreon down and use Thunder Punch. And the reason he had Cap use Thunder Punch is because then Behem would just like teleport over to like take the hit because it has Lightning Rod now. But while this is happening, he has Charizard launch his giant Terra Blast down at them. And then Spinel's like, dude, why would you do that? Pikachu's right there. You're gonna kill the captain. But then he's like, no, I won't, because you use Skill Swap. Because Behem had the ability Telepathy that allowed Pikachu to teleport out of the way just in time, meaning the blast only hit Spinel's Pokemon and Cap was just completely unfazed. This might be like the most complex but also like game accurate strategy that the Pokemon anime has like ever had. Anyway, yap sesh over. So Amethio's there now too, and he's like, hey Gibeon, I think Spinel has some ulterior motives. And Gibeon's like, bro, I don't believe you. I've disowned you. You're not my grandson anymore, you hack. But you know who else has some ulterior motives? Zygarde. As it turns out, it wasn't just digging up the Laquium, it was freeing Lucius, who had been stuck in that Laquium for 100 years, and just like Gibeon, the Laquium had been keeping him alive. And it turns out Zygarde had been collaborating with the enemy this whole time, because throughout everything that's been happening, it's been using its cells all throughout the world to communicate with Lucius and tell him all about the Rising Volt Tacklers and Liko's journey, so he knows everything. And he's just like, Liko, my great-great-granddaughter, I'm so proud of you. And then Gibeon's all like, Zygarde, you're my only friend, man, how could you? At least battle with me and help me defeat these losers. And Zygarde's like, okay. And just like that, Zygarde is back on Gibeon's side, and Liko, Roy, Dot, and Amethio have to take it down. While Roy and Dot are knocked out of the battle, Liko's Floragato manages to evolve into Meowscarada, and Liko and Amethio are able to team up and take down Gibeon once and for all, defeating Zygarde. Well, okay, they didn't actually defeat Zygarde, they kind of just got it to the point where it was like, alright, I trust you guys, you're the chosen ones, peace. And then Zygarde splits off into all of its cells and just scatters all over the world. And as you can imagine, Gibeon just absolutely loses it as he just feels betrayed by everyone. Unfortunately, the Laquium, just like it did 100 years ago, is starting to spread uncontrollably as Gibeon was harvesting it. So Terapagos transforms into its stellar form for the first time and uses its power to literally destroy all of the Laquium. However, this has a consequence, as Lucius and Gibeon were only alive due to the Laquium's energy, and they have some final few words with their descendants before perishing. Also, with Lucius dead, all of his Pokemon become wild again. I don't know how that works, like the tech behind it, but all of the Pokeballs just open back up, and boom, the 6 heroes are just wild Pokemon once again. But also, with Gibeon dead, Spinel's like, hey, the explorers need a new leader. That'll be me. I'm in charge now. I'm the main character. And it turns out, before Terapagos destroyed all the Laquium, he had stored some of the mist for himself and unleashes it on the 6 heroes. Lucius's Pokemon all start to go on a rampage, destroying everything in Laqua, and the Rising Voltacklers are basically forced to make a run for it if they want to survive. Unfortunately, the Brave Olivine, as we've mentioned, can't get to Laqua because of how high up it is. Luckily, remember that big red button? Well, Orla presses it, and the Brave Olivine has a complete mech transformation into Brave Olivine Infinite Rising with rocket-powered fuel, and it's able to get super high up, and everyone's able to get on it, and everyone's safe and happy. Except actually, I lied. Because the winds are so intense that they end up blowing Freed and Charizard right to the edge of the ship, with Charizard essentially having no strength left to fly. And in a final act of desperation, Freed takes Captain Pikachu, hands it to Liko, and then him and Charizard fly off the ship and fall thousands of feet, possibly to their deaths. Holy shit. So with that traumatic image in her head, a full year passes and Liko is back at Indigo Academy, basically continuing her life as a normal student. Meanwhile, Spinel is taken over Exceed after Gibeon's death, and essentially framed the Rising Voltacklers for everything that went down on Laqua, and paints the Explorers as this really heroic group that's going to save everyone. And Roy during all this time has just been off on a journey, and to really phone in the Ash Ketchum style element, he has Captain Pikachu now, and also caught a Lucario. Though this is a shiny Lucario, and also he has a Keystone and it can Mega Evolve. There's definitely a story there that we don't know. And that, my friends, is where we leave off. That is the end of Pokemon Horizons pre-time skip, or I guess a little post-time skip. The end of Pokemon Horizons pre-Mega Voltage. And can I just say, Pokemon Horizons has been such a breath of fresh air. I feel like every Pokemon series up till Sun and Moon, I mean, they were all basically the same song and dance every time. Then Sun and Moon kind of changed it up a bit with the school setting. Ash actually won the Alola League. And then Journeys definitely felt like, you could kind of tell from the start, in my opinion at least, that it was Ash's swan song. It's the World Championships. You're not going to get much bigger than that. But the big issue that I and a lot of other people I know had with Journeys is it just tried to cram so much randomness in, because it was trying to do its own thing, but also conclude Ash's journey. Like, it felt like every episode was very disconnected because of just how much they wanted to include. And oh my god, Horizons just has fixed that to a tremendous degree. Like, I was not expecting Pokemon to ever have a time skip. I mean, it's only a year, but still. And all of a sudden, one of the main characters is presumed dead. The main villain, I mean, he's dead. And really anything could happen. So thank you for joining me on this journey as I recount 89 episodes of Pokemon Horizons, minus some filler. I didn't mention the pig episode. And only time will tell where Mega Voltage will take us in the future. I just really hope we get to see more of Mighty G, because oh my god, I would watch a whole show just about this man. Now, because I'm a YouTuber, I'm gonna now tell you to like the video and subscribe and hit the bell and everything I probably should have said like halfway through this video instead of at the very end. But also, thank you so much for making it to the very end. I know this video is like too long, but I really do appreciate all the support. And as always, I'll see you later, Gator Taters.